Architecture CodeX. If you want to see more, like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe.
Attitudes about art and art museums has changed significantly in the last 60 years. We saw that contrast in the two Whitney museums in Architecture Codex number 20. There's another case study in the Walker Art Museum in Minneapolis. While the personal collection of Thomas Barlow Walker, a lumber baron, goes back to 1879, the museum was not formally established until 1927. And in 1971, they built a home in their museum designed by Edward Larrabee Barnes. He is an architect with 3 names, so you know he must be good. Edward Larrabee Barnes, an AIA Gold Medal winner, studied at the Harvard Graduate School of Design under Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer, and served in the U.S. Navy in World War II. His architecture career included a variety of commissions and teaching appointments. Among his most notable works, at least notable to me, are the Master Plan for the State University of New York at Purchase, done around 1971, the Haystack Mountain Art School in Deer Isle, Maine, the former IBM Tower in Manhattan, now 560 Madison, with its public atrium, the Katonah Museum of Art, and the former IBM office building in Mount Pleasant, New York. All of these buildings are modern, subtle, and different from each other. If you have not heard of him, it's because he did not shout his architecture. He did not create headlines. I would compare his gentle design of the Katonah Museum of Art to Nouvelle Cuisine, where minute dabs of food are delicately placed on a large but mostly empty plate, whereas something like the Daniel Libeskind Royal Ontario Museum in Toronto is a heaping architectural Olive Garden platter, deceptive, artificial, and too much for gentle digestion. Larrabee's Walker Museum, then, is what you would expect it to be. Simple, dignified, modernist boxes rendered in brick without pretense or ostentation. The entry was a simple rectangular metal slab reaching out to the public street, less like a handshake and more like a cold wave. Sunlight was not required, so windows were not provided. Art hates sunlight, or should I say, art curators hate sunlight. They don't see museums as a place where people go so much as a vault for their collection, and if UV rays from sunlight damage their art, there shall be no sunlight. Likewise, they will maintain a strict temperature and humidity to make sure their art lasts forever, or so they hope, as long as they can make sure the guards keep people from touching it. In contrast today, you have kid-oriented science museums where visitors are encouraged to touch everything, play with devices, and see how things changed. We had to stop taking our kids to those science museums because a couple of days after each visit, they would come down with colds and flu. I thought that to enhance the learning experience, next to every different tactile display, the curator should put little cards showing pictures of the microbes and listing their scientific nomenclature. This way the children would understand the diseases they were contracting. This is just one of the examples that the newer museums have responded to human beings. Humans like sunlight, they like to eat, they like to shop, and some of them even like art. But mostly I think people like to say they went to the museum, and the souvenirs in the shop are a way for people to virtual signal that they've been to the museum. So when the Walker Museum wanted to double their size, they engaged Herzog De Meuron to make the building more inviting and accommodating to humans. And it appears they did so in a 21st century kind of way. Although at times it seems the beings accommodated were not human beings, but creatures more like the Krell. Jacques Herzog and Pierre De Meuron are Swiss-born and Swiss-educated architects who formed their partnership in 1978. They have already won the Pritzker Prize. And while they are probably best known for Beijing National Stadium, the 2008 Olympic Games, nicknamed the Bird's Nest, they have works in Barcelona, Hamburg, Beirut, and elsewhere. They are not pushing a branded style of architecture, which I normally consider a plus, but neither are they building buildings that respond to the context. They seem instead to try to destroy existing context and create their own. And that might be the motivation behind the patrons who engage Herzog and De Meuron to design their buildings. So I would never expect a firm like Herzog and De Meuron to approach a problem like an addition to the Buckingham Palace for the Queen's Gallery and say, hey, let's go classical, and build a solution like architect John Simpson in a historic style that augments what came before. But I suppose that's why you hired John Simpson for Buckingham Palace and Herzog and De Meuron for the Walker Museum. For we architects who are a little more eclectic in our style because we know and love all different kinds of architecture, we find that kind of niche branding limiting. And that's why when I am asked, what style architecture do you do? I usually respond, appropriate. While Herzog and De Meuron's style is distinctive in its difference from traditional forms, the buildings do not seem to have any commonality that might reflect the design philosophy or personality of the named partners. The actual personalities of Jacques Herzog and Pierre De Meuron seem generically reclusive enough that the firm could easily continue for decades without either architect. This is like if you were to attend a 2021 concert for the Temptations. They would still be called the Temptations, and the music would sound the same, but only one of the singers, Otis Williams, was one of the original 5 Temptations of 1965. Regarding Herzog and De Meuron's building at the Walker Museum, I have mixed feelings. It's like any Claes Oldenburg sculpture. I can appreciate the cleverness, but there's a point where you want to say, oh, this again? I do respect that, like the IMP renovation at the Louvre, Architecture Codex number 28, Herzog and De Meuron did not obliterate the previous museum, even though at 40 years, such a building begins to look old and dated. But they're not yet old enough to be considered venerable. That is often why buildings are demolished after 40 years. So Herzog and De Meuron preserved the existing Larrabee Barnes rendition and established a healthy distance, stylistically, for their addition. The new building carefully and almost literally unravels the staid box rectilinear Walker Museum of Edward Larrabee Barnes by spinning the orientation of the boxes in plan and elevation, as if unfolding a corrugated cardboard box, revealing flaps and angles that were hidden when it was in its composed state. Even doorways and windows, normally flat rectangles, are transmogrified into sloppy parallelograms. They also changed the materials, nothing rigid and modular like brick, using instead metals bent and twisted, deformed to make sure no surface was smooth or flat. And glass extends across entire surfaces, but hints at solid and geometric complexity within. Beyond style, the program added a number of functions missing from traditional museums. Like shopping malls, which made purchasing dry goods an adventurous excursion, museums of our time are designed for the casual shopper. The museum shops are greatly enlarged, stocked with branded merchandise, and often placed such that one must pass through it to get to someplace else. There are restaurants and food service accommodations for business meetings and weddings to bring your event up a notch in sophistication. All this is to attract the museum goer who might only go when there are out-of-towners and they want to show them, hey, look, we have art too. Now let's go find a bar. As for the art collection on the inside, the new building is an appropriate expression of the collection. It is bold and showy, but has little substance. And aside from the works by Edward Hopper and similar artists, Much of the work is the usual modern, pompous stuff. You know you are in trouble if the artist describes their work as an install. And I appreciate the pedestrian nature of folk art too, but at some point, doing their art for years, you would expect them to get better. Tom Wolfe exposed the myth of modern art business a long time ago in his 1975 book, The Painted Word. He depicted its smug elitism as purposely meant to deride we Philistines who think artists should be able to draw, paint, sculpt, and otherwise depict realism before they venture into abstract expressionism. No one is more modern than Calder, but his works speak to me because his mobiles must respond to the laws of physics that govern the world which we all experience. And I never got a sense from a Calder that he was angry at me for his life. And in case you didn't know, the tortured artist effect is just another boring bourgeois cliche. The result then is that most of our modern art museums and their contents are as Shakespeare described in Macbeth, as Macbeth is contemplating the meaninglessness of his life. A tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I'm Michael Molinelli, and this is Architecture Codex.